What I'd love to jump in with is a big and somewhat, well, both complex and straightforward question, which is literally just what is happiness in your view?
Yeah. So, of course, there are many definitions to happiness, and some people have just given up on it and said, well, happiness is like beauty. You basically know it when you see it or know it when you experience it. I do think there is real value to defining happiness because when we know what we're looking for, we're more likely to find it. So happiness comprises, according to my definition, of 5 elements. It's about spiritual well-being, physical well-being, intellectual well-being, relational, that is interpersonal well-being, and finally, emotional well-being. And it's these 5 elements, spiritual, physical, intellectual, relational, and emotional, that together make up the acronym SPIRE and together contribute to a happy life. Now, that doesn't mean that we need all of them simultaneously or that we can't be happy if we are amiss on 1 or even 4 of them. But it does mean that they are good heuristics, good things to think about as we pursue happiness.
Could you break down maybe a definition of each of those elements for us?
Sure. So spiritual well-being can be about religion, of course, but it doesn't have to be. Spiritual well-being is about experiencing a sense of meaning and purpose in life. It is also about being able to be present in the moment, to fully experience existence. Albert Einstein once remarked that there are 2 ways to live our life. One is as if nothing is a miracle. The other is as if everything is a miracle. And when we're present, when we're in flow, we experience much of our existence as a miracle. So that is a spiritual well-being, a sense of meaning and a sense of presence. Physical well-being, of course, is about health. It's about regular exercise. It's about sleep. It's about nutrition. Then we have intellectual well-being. Intellectual well-being is about curiosity and learning. That there is research recently came out showing that people who are curious, who ask many questions, who constantly learn, are actually more likely to live longer. So curiosity is associated with health and longevity. So that's intellectual well-being. Then we have relational well-being. Number 1 predictor of happiness, quality time we spend with people we care about and who care about us. And finally, emotional well-being, which is about cultivating pleasurable emotions, of course, and no less important, learning to deal with painful emotions.
It's a great model. It's very all-encompassing in a really nice way. As you were talking through those categories, I was thinking about flow, which you mentioned. Do you see flow and the experience of flow state in general as sitting under one of those categories specifically, or as potentially being something that enhances all of those 5 different forms of well-being?
That's a good question, and it goes to the essence of the model. And the essence of the model is that everything is interconnected. So if, for example, I enjoy healthy relationships, of course, I'm going to experience more pleasurable emotions. Moreover, a relationship is meaningful. Potentially, a good relationship is meaningful. So it's also associated with spiritual well-being. There's a lot of research tying physical health and relationships, and and so on and so on. So you can connect each one of the SPIRE elements to any of the other. Flow is a broad enough concept so that it fits into all of the categories. When I teach flow, which I do as part of our certificate program and part of our other programs and intervention, I usually teach it under physical well-being because I talk about the mind-body connection. I also teach it under spiritual well-being because it's very much about meditation in action. Flow is also a source of emotional well-being. It's what Mihai Csikszentmihalyi called, a peak experience. It's also about peak performance. So it's related to intellectual growth and development because when I learn something and I'm in flow, I'm much more likely to develop and grow and learn and internalize the material. So it's really connected to the 5 SPIRE elements.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I'm really curious because one of the things we're obsessed with here at the Flow Research Collective is teaching and training flow and trying to take this elusive, sporadic state of consciousness and give people tools that make it at least easier to access that state with some level of consistency rather than being totally elusive. I'm really curious what some of the things you teach are when you're teaching flow.
Right. So, I focus on the straightforward or ideas that Csikszentmihalyi talks about, in terms of the right level of challenge, not too difficult, not too easy, about ongoing clear feedback. That's, of course, important. The thing that I focus on more, and that is because it brings flow and happiness together in the most powerful way, is doing things that we deem as worthy. In other words, that are meaningful to us. And of course, Csikszentmihalyi talks about it. So finding something that I'm passionate about, to my mind, is the essence of a happy life. It also doesn't guarantee, but it significantly increases the likelihood that I'll experience flow. That to me is the leverage point, the key element for leading a life of flow, of engagement.
That makes sense. With respect to the SPIRE model and the 5 different elements, are there actions or guidelines or even habits that you recommend people deploy within each category to fully flourish within each domain?
Yeah, so first of all, the key word here is habits or rituals. Because, it's one thing understanding something at the on the intellectual level. It's another thing actually implementing it and making it part of your life. I often think about the double standard that exists when it comes to psychological change. And that double standard is that, for example, if you had decided, Rian, that you want to be a good football player, well, first thing you would do is, find a coach and then practice on the field, kick that ball around. Or if you decided you want to be a better musician, you would, sit in front of your piano or take up the harmonica, whatever, and play, practice. Whereas when it comes to happiness, many people think that it's enough to just know about it. Just take a course on happiness or on flow and read the book, Finding Flow, or read the book, The How of Happiness, and you're all set. And again, there's a double standard, because when it comes to happiness or cultivating any psychological state, we need to put in the work. We need to practice just as we do when we develop any other skill. And the key here is, once again, habits. In music, you need the habit of practicing daily. In football, you need the habit of, being on that field daily, or being in the gym or wherever. We need to create those habits. So yes, absolutely, every one of the SPIRE elements has a long list of habits that are associated with it.
That two of the words I wrote down there are just practice happiness, because that alone as a statement is a paradigm shifter for a lot of people. The idea of bringing a growth mindset into an area like happiness is just something, people don't tend to do. We don't tend to think that you have to work hard at the habits that lead to happiness, but
then we pay a very high price for that. You see it also in other areas, this double standard. For example, relationships. So we go into a relationship and we think, the most important thing is finding that right partner. And once I find that right partner, then we'll live happily ever after. This is really the model that we're exposed to in the movies. Problem, though, is that movies end where love begins. And it's after we fall in love and commit to one another, that's when the real hard work continues. And again, there is a double standard here, because when we look for our ideal job and we find it, we don't say, okay, found it, that's it, now I can just rest on my laurels and do nothing. No, that's when we start working really hard, because we had just found our ideal job. The same should apply to relationships. This is when we start working really hard, because we have found our partner.
If what you've heard on Flow Research Collective Radio has been helpful, please consider doing us a solid and leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening to this. Reviews help us connect to a wider audience so we can get these peak performance principles out to more people.